Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Revenge of the Switch Part 1. Games I found on the Nintendo Switch Genesis port. Back when I owned a Sega Genesis, I had a very small library of games compared to my Nintendo library. I've already spoken at length about the games that I remembered most, either because I owned a copy or through repeat rentals. But in the intervening years, and through the Sega Genesis app on the Nintendo Switch, which my wife got because she never had a Genesis herself and wanted to see what they had available to play, I was available to get caught up on a few of the more revered games in their back catalog. These were games that I'd heard good things about, or something that looked cool, and I gave them a shot. I'm not going to be so bold as to say I completed any of them, but each and every one was a unique and memorable experience in its own right that I just had to talk about. This is going to be a short one today, dear listeners, and without further ado, let's get into these revisits to the Genesis from a time when I missed them. Originally released in 1993, Gunstar Heroes is a side-scrolling run-and-gun game produced by Sega for the Genesis and looks strikingly similar to Konami classic Contra. There are 7 stages, the first 4 of which can be tackled in any order, and it revolves around 2 gun-toting heroes trying to take down an evil empire and recover 4 special gems to save the world. That's pretty much the whole plot. I've heard of this title for many years, but it was long after the time of the Genesis before I ever saw a copy in the wild in a secondhand game store. When I saw it become available on the Genesis port store, the one that looks like the inside of an early 90s tween's room with quote-unquote classic Genesis titles on the digital shelf, I decided to try it out. It was certainly a fun half hour of running and gunning across a 2.5D plane, and I can see why many people came to the same conclusion I did, that this game strongly reminds the player of Contra. Specifically, it reminded me of Contra 3, with its superior graphics, busy backgrounds, and wild shifts in tone and action per stage. But the connection is a bit more solid than that, as a number of the Konami developers who had worked on the Contra games pitched Gunstar Heroes to their bosses at Konami, only for it to be rejected. And upset about such a corporate decision, they formed their own company and sold the idea to Sega, who jumped on it. Upon its initial release, Gunstar Heroes was a critical hit and has been ported to multiple systems over the years, which would explain how it ended up on the Switch port app. Now, I'm not going to say this game is going to be a new favorite that I will come back to again and again. I got everything I needed out of that half hour I played it, though. I think for me, this is a game whose time has passed. However, thanks to the port, I am glad I finally got to play this big hit of yesteryear. It's a good game, and certainly has aged well, where many of its contemporaries simply have not. So, small confession here, dear listeners. I actually had a physical copy of this title when it released back in 1993. It was one of the few Genesis games I owned. I don't really know why I liked it, or had it, other than it had a ninja and it looked cool, I guess. I never got beyond the first few stages, and it kind of slipped my mind for a very long time. But when I saw Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master as part of the Genesis port, I had to try my luck at it once again. The plot is as simple as it comes and is perfect early 1990s fodder. The criminal empire known as Neo-Zed, thought destroyed 2 years earlier, has returned to take over the world. Our hero, Joe Musashi, has come back from self-imposed exile to destroy these fiends once and for all. This side-scrolling platformer was seen as a drastic improvement over the previous game, with levels being less difficult and the speed of characters and enemies pumped up. I did not play the previous game, so I cannot speak to that, but this game was certainly a lot more fun than Ninja Gaiden ever was for me. The first stage certainly left an impression, with ninjas leaping from kites, racing breakneck astride a horse while flinging deadly shards of sharpened steel headlong into the teeth of adventure. And I would get my ninja adventure handed back to me and again on a silver platter, as I would get wiped out repeatedly. I maybe got to the next stage a handful of times, and the stage after that only once or twice. Why am I so bad at platformers? I don't know. Probably for the same reason I can't balance a checkbook, or I look at social situations like I'm being sent to the hangman's noose. Can't be good at everything, I suppose. How did I fare at the return of this game almost 30 years later? Well, I can say with confidence I am, if anything, even worse at it than I was when my hands didn't cramp up randomly for no reason. But none of that prevents Shinobi 3 from being a critical success and remembered as one of the best games for the Sega Genesis. It was nice to return to this title after so many years, even if I called it quits after the first stage. And let's be honest, even after all this time, ninjas are still pretty cool. Originally released in 1995, very late in the Genesis's life cycle, Ristar was yet another in a very long line of mascot platformers meant to rival Mario and Sonic. In this game, you play as an anthropomorphic star in a far-off galaxy looking to jump and thump your way through the legions of the evil space pirate Kaiser Greedy in search of rescuing the legendary hero. Ristar's gimmick is his overly long arms, and much like a certain dark fantasy game involving castles and vampires released a few years earlier on a rival system, this 8-motion direction action of Ristar's arms allowed players to attack, tackle, throw, and swing towards victory. The slick cartoon graphics were also a huge draw, perhaps pumping out the best graphics the Genesis could produce at the end of its service life cycle. I had heard a lot of good buzz over the years about this orphan of the Sega collection that never received any sequels, but for those who had played it back in the day and upon its re-releases, it engendered nothing but positive nostalgia. I was finally able to play it on the Genesis port for the Switch, and I'll admit, it was a very cute game and a lot of fun. Did I know what I was doing? Nope. I'm still as bad at platformers starring other characters beyond blue hedgehogs and Brooklyn ethnic slurs, but at least I can say it wasn't miserable. And the review numbers seem to agree. Ristar was positively received, sitting at roughly around 8 out of 10 or equivalent score, depending on review outlet, and it has only grown in popularity over the years. But not enough popularity for Sega to think about making a sequel to it, as opposed to Sonic the Hedgehog's multitude of sequels, offshoots, media blitzes, and the kind of empire that would make Tony Montana green with envy. I didn't really much get beyond the first stage of Ristar, but it did leave a positive impression on me, enough that I may revisit it someday and see if I can get beyond where I left off. It may not be much to say as far as a review, but Ristar was one of the few platformers I can say was worth my time, and was actually fun, more than an absurd endurance test. There you go, dear listeners. 3 short, sweet reviews from the Sega classics that might spark your interest in these games if you haven't played them already. I'm sure there are others that I missed, and I may stumble upon them someday, but as time is a precious resource, that will have to wait for further on down the road. But stay tuned to part 2, where I tackle some personal hidden gems from another console stuffed away on the Switch port machine. And as always, thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Masked Llama, Martin Cabell, and the many listeners and supporters for being patrons and fans of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves Podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.